All right, hello everyone, and welcome to week 2 of our A&P1 web lecture. I hope that you guys have gotten off to a good start. I've gotten to meet a few of you, and I appreciate you guys coming by to introduce yourselves. There's some of you that I haven't heard from just yet, but I just want to always remind you that I encourage you to come by, say hi, get any help that you might need. So week 1, I'm sure, was a little bit overwhelming, and there's a lot going on in A&P1. And so at this point, it is Monday, March 30th, and your first lecture test is due tomorrow on Tuesday. So hopefully you are working hard on lecture test 1 material, learning chapters 1 and 2, and of course, feel free to come by and see me if you have any concerns or issues. So this video is to prepare you and just kind of introduce our lecture test 2 material, which I'm about to open up this lecture module as soon as I finish this video. So a few important things that I want to go over with you. The first thing is that our due dates for lecture test 2 are going to be Tuesday, April 7th. So really you have about another week to learn our next 2 chapters. Your homework assignments are due by midnight on April 7th, and then of course your test is due by the time the testing center closes. So this particular lecture test is going to cover 2 chapters as well. We're going to look at chapter 3, which is a biology review. This is a chapter that is one of my personal favorites because I was a biology teacher for many years. And then we also have chapter 4, which is tissues. And so what you're going to find is that we're moving up in organization. So in chapter 1, we learned that life is organized, and we start with the chemical levels like atoms and molecules and compounds. We go into macromolecules, which are these big life molecules. Then we get into organelles and cells. And so chapter 3 is going to focus on the organelles and the cellular level and the different cellular processes that take place. Then the next level of organization is that cells make up tissues, and so you can see that chapter 4 is going to be all about tissues. And then after that, tissues make up organs, which make up organ systems, and that's essentially what you're going to be going through for the rest of Anatomy and Physiology 1 on into A&P 2. So we're just kind of moving along this organization. Chapter 2 is the chemical level, chapter 3 is going to be the cellular level, chapter 4 is going to be the tissue level, and then every chapter after this is going to focus on organ systems and the organs that make them up. So you're watching this video now over the overview, and so the things that I want to touch on, of course, are the things to know. If we were meeting in person, we'd kind of take a look at this at the beginning of each unit or the beginning of each chapter. So this is what your things to know looks like. You have this in your packet, and hopefully you are using that packet and familiar with the materials that are available to you. So at the very beginning, we have our word bits. Remember, on every test, you're going to have matching sections where you have to match word bits with their definitions. So definitely want to be studying these. Also, these are just really important in general test-taking strategy, okay? If I'm teaching, and you've probably already heard me use some of these prefixes and explaining them, these little prefixes and suffixes and root words can be excellent helpers just in basic test-taking strategy, things like extra and intra. You're going to be looking at like cell transport, and so you have to know the difference between inside the cell and outside the cell. Things like, hyper and hypo. You're going to take a look at hypertonic and hypotonic and isotonic, and we're going to continue to see many of these prefixes. Down here in chapter 4, you see epi. We see epi in many chapters, okay? So I would just encourage you to definitely learn your word bits, and that will not only help you in A&P1, but as you move forward into other subjects or on into new programs. Anytime you're using these prefixes, it can help you narrow down meanings of words, and it's just general test-taking strategy. Now, in terms of our objectives for chapter 3 and chapter 4, you have them listed here. This right here is just really kind of an overview of some of these objectives. And these terms to know, they are not separate, okay? These terms to know should be covered in chapter 3, okay? So it's not that they're completely separate material. So really you're just going to focus on these 6 objectives here, and just like you saw in the first lecture unit, your PowerPoints are broken down by objective, your videos and your notes are broken down by objective, and then some of your review activities are broken down by objective. So I would encourage you to, when you're studying, kind of focus on one objective at a time, learn one before you move to the next. And something else I would encourage you to do is when you're studying, study in small increments. I would not try to learn 1 chapter or 2 chapters in one evening. I would try to learn, maybe 1 to 3 objectives at a time, depending on how lengthy that objective is. So there you have your list of 6 for chapter 3 and your list of 7 for chapter 4. And everything you need is going to be found in the PowerPoints and the videos and any of the practice materials that you have available. As always, the practice materials are not required, but I would encourage you to test yourself in as many ways as possible, whether that be flashcards, whether that be practice activities. The more you can expose yourself to questions and test to see if you really know the information, the better off you will be. I also want to take a look here at your possible essay questions, and something I want to point out. I'm not seeing my highlighter here, but I'll just use this one. Something I want to point out is there's a change down here in your possible essays. On question number 4, on your handout it says that it's in chapter 3, but I've corrected it. Number 4 is actually in chapter 4. Okay, so the first 3 potential essays are going to be found in chapter 3, and then the remaining possible essays are going to be found in chapter 4. Be sure that you are preparing for those essays. They do not have to be long. I'm not looking for a particular length. What I'm looking for when I grade essays is content. I'm looking for correctness. You do not even have to write incomplete sentences. I just need you to answer the question. And I do give partial credit. So, if they're worth 5 points, even if you get 2, 2 is better than 0, okay? I will say it all the time that any points are better than no points, okay? And so please attempt those. Remember that if you are prepared for these essays, you're also going to be prepared for multiple choice questions up here, because these essays come from these objectives, okay? So be sure that you are preparing for the essays, and then when you're taking your test, let's say you can't remember everything, you may come across multiple choice questions that have information in them, so you can always go back and add or edit as you read other questions, okay? Now, something else I want to point out, like for instance, the 4 components of the cell membrane and a function of each. Some of these components have more than one function. So notice it says a function of each. All I need you to do are list the 4 components and give me one function. So when you're learning that, just focus on the one that you know that you can remember the most. You don't have to try to remember all of the functions for essay purposes. Same thing for the 5 organelles. There are more than 5 listed in your PowerPoint. I just need you to choose 5 that you feel like you can remember the best, and then give a function. And it's also important to understand that you can put this in your own words. They do not have to be worded exactly as they were in the notes. If you understand something, you should be able to understand it if it's worded differently, and you should be able to word it in your own way, okay? So like, for example, one of our organelles is the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is commonly known as the powerhouse. I will tell you that powerhouse isn't quite enough for a college level, but there are multiple ways that we could give the function of the mitochondria. We could say the mitochondria makes energy for the cell. The mitochondria produces ATP, which is energy for the cell. The mitochondria is the site of cellular respiration, which is the major metabolic chemical reaction that happens to produce energy. And so just right there with mitochondria, I gave you the function in 3 different ways. It makes energy, it makes ATP for the cell, or it's the site of cellular respiration. And all 3 of those are saying the same thing, okay? So don't feel like you have to memorize something exactly word for word. What I would encourage you to do is have an understanding of it, and then it will be much easier for you to write those essays, okay? If you try to memorize everything, you're probably going to fall short and your brain will get overloaded, okay? So you need to understand the content, not just memorize. So number 3, the difference between hyper, hypo, and isotonic. You also kind of need to understand what's going to happen to a cell in each of those solutions. So like in isotonic conditions, that means equal solute. And so the cell would remain the same because water is just going to pass back and forth freely in equal amounts. And so when you learn these terms, you can use those prefixes to help you, like hyper means more, hypo means low, iso means equal. But you also need to understand what's going to happen with the cell when you put it in one of these solutions. And then down here we have 4, 5, and 6. Nervous tissue, one of the main cells is a neuron, and so in your notes it talks about the 4 main parts and what they do. The next question is about the 4 main tissue types. So chapter 4 primarily focuses on epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. And so that's what the essay number 5 is asking, those 4 main tissue types and some characteristics of each. And then number 6 is specifically asking about muscle tissue, okay? So you have skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. Sometimes students will get essays 5 and 6 confused. So number 5 is the general 4 types of tissues, and number 6 is specific to the 3 types of muscle tissue. And then once again, some characteristics and where you find them. So that takes care of our things to know. And then as always, as you scroll down through Moodle, you're going to have your notes, you have your PowerPoints, you have the fill-in-the-blank note handouts. I've already handed out some to students who came by to see me. If you aren't able to print them, I will be more than happy to give you copies of the fill-in-the-blank note handouts. Something else you will find is 2 documents that have videos on them. If you are not familiar with the Amoeba Sisters, if you've taken biology class sometime in the last several years, you may have seen Amoeba Sisters. Your teachers may have showed you some of those. Now, the reason I like Amoeba Sisters is because they cover it on an appropriate level for what you need to know here, okay? If you were taking college level biology, they really probably wouldn't be enough. But just for this biology overview, these Amoeba Sisters videos can be very helpful in understanding some of these biological concepts. Then in chapter 4, you also have the PowerPoint, the fill-in-the-blank note handouts, and a document that has video links on it. As always, you have your lecture recordings that are broken down by objective. You can watch those if you want to hear me explain the PowerPoints. You have some study materials. I'll be honest, I did not create these Quizlets. I don't know much about the Quizlets. You're welcome to try them out. There's a video here that has a handout that you might find helpful. Some of these things are in your packet. There's some other videos that you could watch just to kind of help you understand some of these concepts. Same thing for chapter 4. You have some practice quizzes. You have these short little video quizzes. You have a practice test, which I would encourage you to do. And then for this particular chapter, or for this particular lecture test, you have another video to watch, and you have a couple of quizzes that you need to take. So I just want to encourage you guys to get started earlier rather than later. I know right now you may have just finished up lecture 2 or lecture 1 material, but I do want you to go ahead and get started on lecture 2 material as soon as you can. Now, one other thing I want to go over really quickly is grades, because I don't get to see you. I don't think about making some of these announcements, but I just wanted you to be aware that I do not use the Moodle gradebook. So like when I grade your test, sometimes what I will do is I may curve based on the highest score. I will never curve more than 10 points, but if no one makes a 100, I will usually curve up to 100. So you may see that your test grade in Moodle does not match the test grade that you see in Genzabar. If you want to know what your grade is in this class, you need to go to MyTC and go to your grade book under your MyTC. It's called Genzabar, and that's where I'll be putting all of your grades in. So at the end of each unit, I'll grade the test. I'll put in all the homework grades. I do drop your lowest grades in the daily category, and so you may see that it drops them out. Even if they're good, when you only have a couple of grades, it's going to automatically drop 2. So in order to see your grades, you're going to want to go onto your MyTC page. So even though Moodle kind of keeps track, I do not use the Moodle gradebook. So that's not going to necessarily accurately represent your average. So I just would encourage you to check Genzabar maybe weekly or at the end of each unit and make sure your grades are matching what you think they should look like, okay? And as always, guys, if you have any questions, please come and see me. I'll be happy to meet you, go over test taking strategy, take a look at any material that might be confusing to you. I'm here to help you. I want you guys to be successful, and just let me know if you need me. I hope you guys have a great week. Good luck on lecture test 2, and I'll check in again next week. Y'all have a great one.